So this may be a bit of a ramble, but I'm going to go into certain books where people sit down and eat supper. And it's not just that these people sit down and eat, it's that the scene in which they eat conveys narrative information. It is something relevant to the story at hand, not necessarily in an immediate fashion, but maybe perhaps in certain themes or other things like that that are relevant to the story. Like I say, it's not just that they eat, it's that the eating conveys something about the story being told. So I'm going to start off with Wastelands by Stephen King. And as much of a problem I have with some of the Wastelands, there is a good scene in here. See, how much do I have to convey? If you don't know, you can look up. But anyways, Roland and the gang, they roll into this town where it's pretty much a town that is dying. Everyone there is 70, at least 70 or older. You know, they're aging out, and you know that it's just inevitable. Slowly, one by one, they're going to die. What's relevant here is that everybody in Roland's little posse here, they get invited to this big meal, this big supper, and after weeks in the wilderness, surviving on next to nothing, they're happy to get here. And through the machinations of the meal and the other interactions with the town and the people in the town, what's being conveyed here is that this town is one of the last remnants of the world that operates in the fashion, more or less, that Roland was accustomed to in his youth. Roland is this gunslinger who grew up in this area that was more or less old Camelot with a Wild West paint job. And so there's a lot of ritual and decorum that comes with each interaction, especially with Roland, because he represents sort of like royalty. He's sort of like a knight, sort of in that ruling elder class. These people are sort of the peasants, so they treat him in a manner that's very specific to how you treat someone of that class, and that brings him back to those old methods and old ways of doing things that he'd been separated from for so long, of just more or less just wandering in the wilderness and of encountering places where all that old stuff had been completely forgotten. I think what a little bit of it is in The Wasteland for that. One, it's revealing character about Roland and his view on the world and where his place in it, that his place in the world is disintegrating. His whole world, his place, his purpose is fading away into oblivion, and something else is taking his place. And it's not necessarily something good taking his place, but what he had wasn't necessarily the best anyways. But it's sort of, in thinking about it, this probably doesn't add up or hold water, but it's sort of like in the Odyssey, when Odysseus demands that his crew tie him to the mast so that he can hear the siren song, right? As they're having to sail past these rocks where the sirens are drawing people into their death. And it's a little bit like that here. Not that Roland wanted to, but that it represents, even though this town is dying, it is a place he could stop for a long time and relive the glory days to this lesser extent. This temptation to stop his quest for the Dark Tower. And how Roland, the character reveal moments in Roland is, even though he longs for that sort of stuff, he has nostalgia for that sort of stuff, his longing for the tower is greater. Like there's a greater drive forwards than in staying here. And I think there's a lot that goes into that scene. Maybe I'm wrong. So what? If I am wrong, who cares? Stephen King, yeah. Another one here, and I'm going to use this for example, but this goes for all the books in this series. This is The Hanging Stones by Manly Wade Wellman. This is a Silver John novel. And in all the Silver John novels and in a bunch of these short stories, sitting down to a meal is an important part of the story. There's sometimes 2 or 3 breaks where just the characters go to a table and they sit down and eat. And what that's doing in these books, like I say, it's a character revealing thing in a couple of ways. Because one, whoever is offering the meal is revealing characters about them. And generally what it is that the simpler, the more common the meal, the more common, simpler the meal is sort of revealing something about the person who cooks and serves the meal in a general sense. There's a lot of instances in here where he'll sit down at somebody's table and it's just plain cornbread and beans, or maybe a slice of ham or something like that. Very simple country fixins. And it's that community aspect of just sitting down and eating with somebody, but also sort of saying like, okay, this person's on the up and up, because they're offering freely of what they have, and it's just normal everyday food. And here there's a character John shares the meals with, and the meal is prepared in an unusual way, right? It's prepared in a way that is reminiscent of like old cavemen. Like you heat up a stone and then you put everything in a pit in the stone and kind of cook it in that fashion. It's got its own complexities to it. But in this book, when that happens, like that's cluing John into the fact that okay, this guy is a bit odd. He has a different way of looking at the world that doesn't necessarily line up with ordinary common folk. He might be a bit sinister. He might have different motives for what he's doing, and a lot of that is gotten at through the dialogue and the interactions John has with them through other means. But the meal just in its own effect sort of like simplifies it. It's sort of like this this little picture of those interactions in short. And so that happens a lot in these books. If you want to get at something like that. Another one here is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. And this one happens way towards the end of the book. The kids, the Pevensey kids, and the crew of the Dawn Treader, they arrive at this island, and investigating the island, they come into this sort of pavilion. From far off, it looks like ruins. When they get close, they know that's not necessarily the case. There's this long table that's decked out with the grandest feast you could ever imagine, better than anything they'd ever seen previously in all their times in Narnia. At the end of the table, well, yeah, that's more or less relevant. At the end of the table is the three lords of I forget which country that they've been hunting for. That's why the reason they went on this quest. But they're asleep, and the hair's grown wild over them. And as they're standing here looking at it, this woman approaches and says that the reason these three men are asleep is not because the food is enchanted. The food is perfectly fine. If you just wait a little minute, you're going to see what the deal is. As they're talking, this old man comes in, and he does some hocus pocus here. And while he's doing this, just thousands of birds come in from the ocean, and they pick up all the old food off the table that had been there from the previous day, and they carry it off. And then new food comes in and takes its place, and it's all fresh and steaming, and the drinks are cold, and it's perfect. It's better. It's a grand feast in the first place. It's better now that it's done over. And what I think's being got at here is like everyone knows that Lewis is big on allegory. So in his books, the thing is what it literally is. Like if it's a big feast on a table, that's what it is. But there's also the allegorical elements, and possibly more than one allegorical element stacked on top of each other. So depending on which way you view it through the glass, you're going to get a different picture. And so what I think is going on here is Lewis is making a statement on communion, on the Eucharist found within the Anglican Church. That's Lewis was a member of the Anglican Church back in the day, much to the disappointment of his friend J.R.R. Tolkien, who was a Roman Catholic. So I think he's making a statement on that, because in the Eucharist, the belief there in Anglicanism is you're literally feasting on the blood and body of Jesus Christ, as he had set up during the Last Supper. You can find that in the Gospels. So I think Lewis may be doing something like that, because there is a picture here of the man and the woman here being responsible for importing this great feast, this life-giving feast onto the island. It's the grandest thing you've ever seen. I don't know if that's supposed to be Mary and Jesus as a picture in that scenario, where Mary comes in to tell people about the feast, but then it's actually Jesus who provides the thing. Jesus is represented by this old man. That may be stretching it too far, but I don't know. I'd like to hear somebody else talk about that and what it could possibly be. If it's not allegory and it really is just as simple as everything it is on its face values, that's pretty cool too, because it's an interesting idea. I think Lewis was getting at something having to do with the Eucharist in that scene. And next I'm going to talk about a specific issue here of JSA. This is the JSA run that started in 1999, and it ran until I think 2007 or 2008. I'm not sure. This particular issue is issue number 52, which is a fill-in issue, which features a Thanksgiving dinner between the members of the Justice Society of America and the Justice League of America. And this one's pretty simple. I mean, it really is. It's everything it just says all the time. It's just a Thanksgiving dinner between people. The conflict of the thing, there's not a big fight in that issue. The conflict is just between the different personalities, maybe rubbing against each other a little bit the wrong way, across the two teams, or maybe even all the same team. But it just it's a fill-in issue, so it's between two larger arcs, two larger storytelling arcs within JSA, and it's just a moment to slow down and to enjoy the book and to enjoy the characters interacting with each other and just breathe a sigh of relief that there's not a gun in anybody's face or world-ending consequences. It really is just as simple in that instance as this meal just is a chance to chill out and relax. And for that, I like it a lot. JSA is one of my favorites, and the interaction between the Justice League and the JSA, especially in this context, is really superb. And we're going to wrap it up with this one. This is Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And the eating in this one is actually fairly important to understanding Tarzan thematically, because Tarzan, in his life as a wild ape, imitating the wild apes, eats raw meat. If you kill something, you instantly dive in and start eating it. Anything you don't finish, you bury, and you come back to it later when it's half rotten. And this appalls a great number of people that Tarzan interacts with, that he would go in with such vigor on something so disgusting as raw, half rotten meat. They just can't understand it. There's a very specific point in this book where it contrasts Tarzan having just made the kill and feasting on this raw flesh to his cousin, John Clayton, who says that at the very moment was rejecting a piece of mutton that came to his table because it was a little underdone. And so, like feasting in here, it can be seen as like, look at how tough Tarzan is. But it's, I think, the great point of Tarzan, the novel, and especially where it gets into like the things he eats and the things he does, is trying to show how it's kind of like Conan. That civilization has made men soft, and that they don't appreciate the things that they have because they're living this soft, sophisticated life. Whereas if they were in the wilderness, if they were having to go through all these rugged trials and tribulations, that they'd be more appreciative of the things they had, and not wouldn't even be imagining these nuances that people get caught up on. It's like Tarzan; he can't even imagine in that simple life. He doesn't even imagine cooking meat with fire. He's seen fire, but it's this completely foreign idea to him. But yet, in all the world at large, like that's a necessary component to eating something. And so, yeah, it's in the greater scheme of Tarzan, it's very Conan-like in that it handles those themes of freedom and civility, enslavement to civility or freedom in being a wild man, and how those two things interact. And you can't have just the one or just the other. It's like even in Conan, eventually Conan wants to go into a town and spend all this gold he's been hoarding on booze and women. And with Tarzan, even Tarzan recognizes the life he's living in the wilderness. He's not. He doesn't know that he's not an animal, but he knows he's not an animal like the other animals are, like the cheetahs or even like the apes. No, he knows he's something completely different, and his true society, his true companionship, is found in that greater human society, which rejects the mutton because it's a little bit underdone. And so, essentially, the book Tarzan is getting at is that there should be maybe a little bit of compromise, where the soft people should get a little harder, and the hard people should enjoy some of the benefits of civility. It's like Tarzan. He gets in here and he's awed by the aspects of human life when he visits, the African frontier and in France and all these places. And even though he doesn't understand a lot of things, he enjoys imitating his fellow man. Anyways, That's a whole bunch of rambling bits of this and that and other things. I might be way off. If you have any opinions on anything I've said so far, let me know about it. If you have anything to add, anything to diverge on, anything you would recommend. If you have a book that's just all about eating, and Tim, I already know you're going to talk about Redwall, leave the comments below. We'll see you.